Stepchildren said I make too many rules for someone who's not blood. So I followed one rule myself. Stop paying for people who don't listen. Hi, I'm Jazz 42, and for most of my life, I believed family was something you built, not something you were born into. I thought love, patience, and consistency could turn anyone into family. I was wrong. 7 years ago, I met Emily, warm, funny, a single mom with twins, Jacob and Jenna, 17 at the time. I wasn't looking for a relationship, but there was something about her. I liked her laugh, the way she treated people, the way she made a house feel like a home. The twins, polite but distant, quiet teenagers who answered in one word and avoided eye contact. I respected that. I figured if I stayed patient, they'd warm up. A year later, Emily and the twins moved into my modest 2-story house. I'd worked construction management for years to afford this place. Not rich, but comfortable. Mortgage paid off, savings solid, yard nice, neighborhood quiet. I wanted to share it all. Stability, safety, a home where love was supposed to grow. I didn't realize I was inviting chaos into peace. Jacob started sneaking snacks, leaving messes, ignoring house rules. Jenna would roll her eyes at everything I said, whispering behind my back. I reminded myself, teens test boundaries. I stayed patient. I stayed consistent. I loved them like they were my own. Then came the day Emily told me, Jazz, the twins say you make too many rules for someone who's not their blood. It hit me. All the patience, all the effort, all the care, dismissed. I felt a mix of hurt, anger, and disbelief. My house, my hard work, my money. And it was treated like it was theirs to take. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let my generosity be abused anymore. One rule I would follow, one rule to protect my peace: stop paying for people who don't listen. Little did I know, enforcing that rule would unleash more chaos than I ever imagined. I started small: subscriptions, video games, the little things I had been covering for them out of habit. Every time I paid, I reminded myself, this stops now. No more freebies for disrespect. No more rewards for bad behavior. At first, it didn't make a difference. Jacob shrugged and grabbed his snacks anyway. Jenna rolled her eyes like I was the villain of her life story. Emily looked at me with that soft, worried expression, trying to mediate. Jazz, maybe they just need time, she said. Time. I'd given them 7 years. So, I stayed firm. I cut back on the extra spending. I reminded them gently, but firmly, that respect came before rewards. And then, things escalated. Jacob slammed his door so hard I thought the frame would crack. Jenna muttered something under her breath that made my blood boil. One evening, I found a note on the kitchen counter. Just 3 words: you're not family. That stung more than I expected, more than anything else. All the meals, the support, the effort I put into making this house a home, gone. Wiped away in a single sentence, written by a teenager who didn't even try to understand. Could have blown up. I could have shouted, grounded, or walked away. But I remembered my rule: protect my peace. My anger stayed in check. My patience, tested like never before, held firm. And then came the first real consequence. Jacob asked Emily for money, not a little allowance, but a full $100 request for a weekend he was planning with friends. Emily hesitated. Looking at me, I said nothing. She handed him the cash. Later that night, she confessed. Jazz, I didn't have the heart to deny him. He looked so sure he'd get it. I nodded, understanding, but also resolute. Then he'll learn the hard way, because sometimes boundaries aren't understood until they bite, and I was ready to let them learn. Little did I know, the chaos that had quietly crept into my life was only getting started. Before I continue, tell, from which place are you watching this story right now? Please subscribe and like the video for motivation. The following weeks were brutal. The small rebellions escalated into daily battles. Jacob would leave the house in a mess so severe I could barely walk through the living room. Socks, empty soda cans, half-eaten sandwiches. It was like a tornado had hit. Jenna? She became a master of subtle sabotage. Homework left unfinished, doors slammed just to test my reaction, whispering insults when she thought I wasn't listening. Every morning I braced myself, wondering what new frustration the day would bring. Emily tried to mediate, but even she admitted the twins were acting out more than ever, and I couldn't blame her. Teenagers are complicated, especially when a new adult is enforcing rules they don't want to follow. But my rule remained clear. Respect comes before rewards. Stop paying for people who won't listen. Then it happened. The moment that made me realize this wasn't just teenage rebellion. It was entitlement. Pure and simple. One Saturday, I discovered a huge credit card charge. Hundreds of dollars on video games, concert tickets, and snacks, all on my card. I confronted Jacob immediately. "Jazz, I just wanted to have fun," he said. As if that excused everything. "Fun doesn't come from stealing," I replied calmly. "You broke the rules. You'll deal with the consequences." Jenna smirked from the doorway. "Good luck enforcing them." And that's when I realized I wasn't just fighting for respect. I was fighting for the house I'd built, the stability I'd offered, and the peace I'd earned. They didn't care about my efforts, my patience, or the home I'd shared. They only cared about taking what they wanted and claiming I had no right to say no. It was at that moment I decided I had to escalate my rule. Subtlety wasn't working anymore. Partial consequences weren't enough. The chaos had to meet a firm, undeniable wall. I would enforce my rule fully. And finally, they would understand. But enforcing it would come at a cost I hadn't anticipated. I woke up that Monday knowing there was no turning back. The subtle reminders, the half measures, the gentle nudges, they hadn't worked. If anything, the twins were emboldened. So I made my decision. My rule would be absolute. No more paying for anything they didn't earn, respect, or appreciate. It started immediately. Their video game subscriptions? Canceled. Snacks? Only what I bought for family meals. Nothing extra. Concert tickets? Forget it. They had to save, work, or earn their own way. Jacob came home that evening, expecting the usual allowance. I handed him a note. Rule in effect. Earn what you want. Respect first, he laughed. Not nervously, not jokingly. He laughed like I was the punchline. Seriously? You're gonna make us pay for everything now? Yes, I said, calm, firm, unwavering. Jenna scoffed. This is ridiculous. You think you can control our lives just because you live here? I don't control your lives, I replied. I control my house, my money, my peace. And that's where this ends, with respect. The next few days were tense. Arguments over chores, money, and respect became daily rituals. I could feel the resentment thickening the air, but I didn't budge. My rule was non-negotiable. Then came the breakthrough, not the one I expected. Jacob, in a rare moment of quiet, said, "Jazz, maybe you were right." I didn't realize how much I was taking for granted. I almost didn't believe him. Jenna was still distant, but even she started picking up after herself. Less eye-rolling, more compliance. Slowly, the chaos began to retreat. The house, which had felt like a battlefield, began to breathe again. It wasn't instant love. It wasn't sudden respect. But for the first time in years, my efforts weren't being ignored or abused. My rule was teaching them something they hadn't learned. Boundaries matter. And me? I realized something about myself too. Generosity is powerful, but it's dangerous without limits. Love alone doesn't fix entitlement. Rules, boundaries, and consequences do. Little did I know. The hardest lesson, for them, and for me, was still ahead. The days after I fully enforced my rule were quiet, in a way that felt both strange and necessary. The chaos that had invaded my house wasn't gone entirely, but it had shifted. Instead of blatant defiance, I began noticing subtle changes. Jacob and Jenna weren't just rebelling less, they were thinking. It started with chores. Jacob, who had never voluntarily cleaned a dish or taken out the trash, started doing them without being asked. At first I thought it was a fluke, a one-off attempt to get me off his back. But then it continued. He even organized the recycling one night after dinner. Something I hadn't asked for, something I hadn't expected. Jenna's change was quieter, but just as noticeable. She started speaking respectfully, acknowledging requests without rolling her eyes, and even smiled at me once. A small, fleeting thing, but a miracle in comparison to the constant scowls I'd endured for years. Emily noticed it too. One evening, she came into the kitchen while I was making dinner and whispered, "Jazz, they're changing. You really drew a line." I didn't say anything. I just nodded. I had done my part, and the universe, in its strange way, had started to respond. But it wasn't just about chores or money. It was about understanding. They were beginning to see that respect, responsibility, and boundaries weren't punishments. They were the rules of living in a real home, in a real family, and it was hard. It hurt them to realize that they couldn't take advantage of generosity anymore. Then came the test. Few weeks later, Jacob asked for a big favor. He wanted to borrow my car for a weekend trip with friends. In the past, I would have handed him the keys without thinking. This time, I didn't. I looked him in the eye. "Earn it," I said simply. He froze. His face went pale. He wasn't used to hearing those words from me, the words that had always been accompanied by action. "Earn it? How?" he asked. I smiled faintly. "Prove responsibility. Show respect. Do what's asked of you at home. Show that you care about this family, not just yourself. Then we'll talk about the car." The silence was deafening. Jacob left the room slowly, and for the first time, I sensed genuine reflection in him. Not defiance, not manipulation. Reflection. Jenna, on the other hand, challenged me in her own way. One afternoon, she deliberately left the kitchen in total chaos after dinner, hoping to provoke me. I walked in, saw the mess, and did nothing at first. I waited, letting her watch me calmly clean a few dishes while she fumed. Then I sat down and said quietly, "Chaos isn't tolerated here. You can either help restore order or accept that consequences follow." Her silence spoke volumes. For the first time, she wasn't looking for a fight. She was looking at boundaries. And I could tell she was learning that respect is earned, not demanded. By the end of the month, the household had transformed. The tension wasn't gone, but the constant battles had faded. Jacob had started paying attention to his actions, learning accountability. Jenna had softened her resistance and even started volunteering to help around the house without being asked. And Emily, she was more at peace seeing the family she had always hoped for slowly coming together under one roof. And me, Jazz, I realized I had learned as much as they had. Love alone isn't enough to sustain a family. Generosity without limits invites chaos. Rules, boundaries, and consequences are not punishments. They are the pillars that hold a family together. For the first time in 7 years, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Balance, peace, a sense of home that wasn't just walls and furniture, but respect and understanding. Hadn't expected the lesson to be this hard, for me or for them. But now I knew this. You can love someone deeply, but if they refuse to respect you, boundaries are not optional. And when you enforce them, the chaos begins to dissolve, one lesson at a time. And just when I thought the storm had passed, something happened that reminded me. Life has a way of testing rules when you least expect it. Just when I thought the household had settled, life threw a curveball that reminded me peace is fragile, and boundaries, no matter how firm, are always tested. It started subtly. Jacob began coming home later than usual, claiming to meet friends. At first I didn't overreact. I had learned patience and observation were more powerful than anger. But one evening, I caught him sneaking in past midnight, looking guilty, holding a bag of energy drinks and snacks. He froze when he saw me in the doorway. "Where were you?" I asked calmly. "Just friends," he mumbled. I let it go for that night, deciding to watch carefully. I wanted him to understand that lying and sneaking around didn't go unnoticed. Consequences were coming, but they had to be meaningful, not reactionary. Jenna, meanwhile, had started a small rebellion of her own. She intentionally left lights on, doors unlocked, and a pile of laundry scattered across the living room. I found a note tucked under the couch cushion. "You'll never control me. Jazz," I read it quietly, taking a deep breath. Part of me wanted to respond angrily, to shout and ground, to assert dominance in the heat of the moment. But I didn't. My rule was clear. Chaos wasn't something I reacted to. It was something I managed. The next morning, I called a family meeting. Emily sat beside me, supportive but nervous. Jacob and Jenna slouched in their chairs, arms crossed, eyes rolling, the perfect picture of teenage defiance. "I want to talk about respect, responsibility, and consequences," I began. My voice was calm but firm. "This house is not a free-for-all. Everything I provide comes with expectations. You've been given chances. You've been given patience. And now it's time to see if you can handle responsibility." Jacob snorted. "This is ridiculous. You can't control everything we do." "You're right," I replied. "I can't control everything, but I can control my house, my rules, and my money. And I will. You can choose to follow them, or face the consequences." For the next week, I put the rule into full action, stricter than ever. No extra snacks, no new games, no favors. Chores weren't optional. Any disrespect was met with immediate, consistent consequence, and Then it hit them hard. Jacob's friends started noticing he couldn't just rely on me anymore. He had to save his own money for the things he wanted. He got frustrated, but slowly he began to understand. Responsibility wasn't punishment, it was empowerment. Jenna tried every trick in the book. Passive aggression, sulking subtle defiance, but she couldn't break the wall I had built. She started helping voluntarily, albeit grudgingly. And in small moments, I caught glimpses of change. A smile here, a polite thank you there. Emily watched all this unfold with relief and awe. "I can't believe it," she whispered one evening. "They're actually learning," I nodded. "It's not about control. It's about boundaries. When they understand the rules, they understand respect. And respect is love in action." By the end of that week, the household had transformed dramatically. The chaos hadn't vanished entirely, but the tension had shifted. Jacob and Jenna weren't perfect, but they were growing. They were learning that life isn't about taking what's given, it's about earning it and honoring the people who provide it. Looked around my house, once a battlefield, now a space of cautious respect, and realized something profound. Love alone wasn't enough to hold a family together. Patience alone couldn't fix entitlement. But rules, consequences, and boundaries combined with love, that was the foundation of something lasting. And just when I thought the lesson had finally sunk in, something happened that would shake us all to the core. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows, bathing the house in a calm that I hadn't felt in years. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe without bracing for conflict. The air still carried traces of tension. Teenage rebellion doesn't disappear overnight. But there was a quiet respect now, a fragile but real understanding. Jacob came into the kitchen looking nervous. He handed me a small envelope. I opened it and found a note inside. "Jazz, I know I've taken your generosity for granted. I'm sorry. I'll earn your trust every day." I stared at it, feeling a lump in my throat. 7 years of struggle, patience, and repeated lessons, and finally, acknowledgement. I looked up at him, and he didn't look defiant. He looked changed. Jenna followed shortly after, holding a plate of cookies she had baked herself. I wanted to do something," she said softly, "to show I can help and that I care. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't over-the-top drama, but it was honest and it was real. For the first time, I saw them as partners in the family, not obstacles or entitlement in motion." Emily came in, smiling, tears in her eyes. "Jazz, this is the family I always wanted." I nodded quietly. "It's what we built together. Rules, love, respect. All of it matters." We spent the day doing small things, cooking together, organizing the living room, joking about the past chaos. Laughter replaced tension. Complaints replaced eye rolls. And slowly the house felt like home again. That evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, I reflected on everything that had happened. The chaos, the disrespect, the challenges, they had been painful, exhausting, and frustrating. But they were necessary. Without them, I would never have learned the power of boundaries. And the stepchildren would never have understood the value of respect. Jacob nudged me. "Jazz, thanks," he said simply, "for not giving up on us." Jenna smiled shyly. "Yeah, thanks." I realized then that love without limits is like a house without walls. It can't stand. But love paired with rules, boundaries, and consequences, that builds something unshakable, something lasting, something real. And in that moment, I felt the peace I had worked for all those years. The storm of chaos had passed, leaving a family stronger than before. Yes, it had been hard. Yes, it had tested every ounce of patience and strength I had. But as I looked at Emily, Jacob, and Jenna, I knew this was worth it, because family isn't just blood. Family is respect. Family is effort. Family is love, enforced with boundaries that teach us how to honor it. And as for me, Jazz, I would never forget this lesson. I would never ignore the red flags, and I would never stop building a home where love and respect walked hand in hand. The chaos had been tamed. The house was no longer a battlefield. And finally, I could say, we were a family.